Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. A new report reveals that aid money urgently needs to be redirected to the poorest countries in order to reach the United Nations goal of ending extreme poverty by 2030. The Overseas Development Institute says that currently middle-income countries receive more aid than the 30 poorest nations. It warns at least 400 million people will still be living on less than $2 a day, despite governments pledging to eliminate all extreme poverty. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
In northern Ethiopia, irrigation channels have turned arid plains into fertile farmland. Agricultural production has quadrupled. Just 3 decades ago, this region was the epicenter of an extreme drought and famine that killed hundreds of thousands of people. The report from the ODI credits Ethiopia's so-called Productive Safety Net program, launched in 2005, with lifting 1.4 million people out of extreme poverty. It enabled Ethiopia to avoid another famine during severe droughts in 2010 and 2015. In contrast, neighbouring Uganda has recently seen extreme poverty levels rise, despite a rapid reduction in previous years.
And one of the reasons is because climate change is starting to have an impact in that country. Now, in Ethiopia, they've managed, with a lot of support, partly from the US, to have programs that support farmers when the sudden climate and a weather event happens. In Uganda, they didn't. So when they had a drought, and when that led to real increase in poverty. So it's a matter of having the right systems in place.
Ethiopia's program, the largest of any low-income country, pays beneficiaries to work on public works projects like irrigation, roads, schools and health clinics, helping to create long-term poverty relief. Such programs are vital in ending extreme poverty, according to the ODI report, which says there is an annual funding shortfall of $125 billion in the 3 core sectors of education, health and what it terms social protection transfers or welfare.
You need to do economic growth to do part of things, and then you also need investment in the social sectors. You need to have both sides of the coin to make this work. The donors are investing both in growth and in the social sectors, but they're not investing it in the right countries to near the extent that's needed. And in particular, in this report, we've identified 29 countries which can't afford the investment needed in the social sectors, and donors are not giving enough money to that group of countries.
The statistics are striking. Middle-income countries receive more aid than poorer countries, whose share of global aid has fallen over the past 6 years from 30% to 24%. The ODI says middle-income countries could afford to eradicate extreme poverty themselves with better tax systems and wiser spending.
So we're looking at countries like Indonesia, we're looking at countries like India, even to extent, countries like China. There is, a lot more potential to increase the taxation in those countries. Altogether, we think in middle-income countries they could raise another $2 trillion of finance. That would go to a long way to eliminating poverty in those countries.
As well as better aid allocation, the report says more donor nations need to reach the UN goal of allocating at least 0.7% of GDP to aid budgets. Without urgent action, the authors warn the goal of eliminating extreme poverty by 2030 will remain out of reach. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.